So today's speakers are two inspiring women from Hammersmith and Fulham who'll be sharing their experience and insights into making your money work better for you and the environment. Our first speaker is Louise Wilson. She's co-founder and managing director at Abundance Investment, which lets people invest their money to help drive the net zero transition from as little as £5. Louise has significant experience in the finance sector, including more than a decade in sustainable finance. And although she's not currently a resident, she was previously for 20 years. And our second speaker is Lily Robertson, who is a Hammersmith and Fulham resident too. And she is a B2B marketer for both large corporates and small startups. And she's also a life coach for working women. After their presentations, you'll be able to ask Lily and Louise your questions. And we're really keen for this to be a discussion, not just a presentation. So do feel free to add stuff in the chat as we go, and your questions in the Q&A box, which you'll see at the top. But you are welcome to come off mute right at the end and ask your questions if you prefer to, but do keep your microphones muted while the speakers are presenting. Before we invite our speakers to the stage, though, I'm just going to pass to Corinne from our Equality, Diversity and Equity team, who is going to tell you a little bit about Women's History Month in H&F and how you can get involved. Thanks, Corinne.
Thank you, Hope. Hi, everyone. So at Hammersmith and Fulham Council, we don't only mark International Women's Day, but we celebrate the whole month. So we've had a month so far jam-packed with events. And as the Women's History Month theme is Inspire Inclusion, we've had a range of events in line with this. So we recently launched our new Women's History Trail in Hammersmith to trace the footsteps of the women who have helped transform our borough into the place it is today. So there are a range of guided walks available, and the dates and times and meeting place are all found on our website. We have also been supporting an art exhibition with the works of local women in art at Kindred Studios in Hammersmith, titled A Seat at My Table. So the exhibition is inspired by Judy Chicago's The Dinner Party, an installation featuring 39 important women who stand out in history. So this exhibition is running until the 8th of April, so you still have some time to book a free ticket online through our website. There have also been, there are various community events being held over the next 2 weeks, I wish it was 2 months, to close off Women's History Month. So there's a conversation on historical trailblazing women who have lived in the borough. This is on the 19th of March at Hammersmith Quaker Meeting House. There's also an exhibition of the works of women artists of Northern Ireland being held at the Irish Cultural Centre until the 19th of April. So you've got plenty of time to book spaces and tickets. Again, all details and links to book are on our website, and it would be lovely to see some of you there. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Corinne. And so now I'm going to pass on to our first speaker, Louise Wilson from Abundance Investment.
Great, thanks, Hope. Right, let me share and hopefully this will go smoothly, just like we practiced it. And you, all right, give me a thumbs up if that's all good.
Perfect.
Brilliant. Well, look, it's lovely to be here. Thank you very much for the invitation. I'm going to start by giving a bit of context around why Abundance exists and my own journey from to here, which was from a senior job in the city. Hope's invitation in LinkedIn, if you saw it, said prepared to be a little bit angry. The beginning of this might make you a bit angry, but I suspect if you've joined this Climate Cafe, you possibly feel a bit angry anyway and a bit frustrated, maybe a bit confused. Certainly, I know those are all things that I have experienced. And then I'm going to talk a bit about what we've been doing more recently in Abundance's business, which is working with councils to help accelerate the net zero transition, including currently working with Hammersmith and Fulham, which does have a lovely kind of circle to it because, as Hope mentioned, Hammersmith and Fulham was my home for 20 years. It was also where Abundance transitioned from the kitchen table into its very first office. So it's brilliant to be back here. So Our house is burning down. I'm sure lots of you do know that. When I first started at Abundance, I'd be saying something like 8 of the last 10 years have been the hottest on record, or 10 of the last 12 years. Unfortunately, we're now at a place where it is 10. The last 10 years have been the hottest on record. That's a clean sweep, not in a good way. And almost everyone is worried. So the government runs a public attitude tracker every quarter. They've been doing this, I think, since 2012. And probably in the last, I don't know, well, the majority of iterations, 80% of people say they are very or fairly concerned about climate change. When you break that down by gender, it's consistently more women than men, although the difference is 85% of women, 76% of men. So overwhelmingly, this is something that we are all concerned about. And it probably is because we are also, the majority of us, saying that we can already feel the impact of it. And the last iteration, they don't ask this question every time, but was 70% of us or thereabouts. And despite a lot of the climate deniers that still seem to get a disproportionate amount of the airtime, actually, we do know it's our fault. And again, the last iteration on this said it's almost 90% of us think that it is a result of human activity. But if you trying to be green, you might very often find that it is confused and confusing. Actually, knowing the right thing to do if you want to try and do something about it is not clear. Like, what do I do with my recycling? Which bin do I put it in? Very often it doesn't feel like it's the cheaper option, and it can feel like it's the preserve of the more wealthy. If I want to fly, then actually I'm here currently actually speaking to you from Australia. I've come to visit family. I'm not going to give that up. So how do we navigate our way through all of that? And the world can seem really upside down in the context of those statistics that I gave you there. It's not just the UK where those numbers appear. And yet policy just seems to have been, at least to my mind, been going backwards over recent years. And we've seen across the board support for green parties ebbing away and support for green policies being diluted. And that can leave to us feeling paralyzed, overwhelmed by the scale of the problem. Even if we want to do something about it, we don't know what to do. And it is, this statistic just frightens me horribly, that 45% of 16 to 25-year-olds around the world say that they feel like their life is negatively impacted by feelings of eco-anxiety, which is now a recognized condition, so much so that when I did a search for this to just look up how it's defined, I was given guidance by the Natural History Museum offering tips on how to cope with it. So, and I guess I would say that my own experience, actually, that I didn't have a name for it then, but back in, well, probably started in the early 2000s, I became much more aware of the environment and humanity's impact on it. And I wanted to do something about it. And I didn't know what it was I wanted to do, but I knew that I wanted to kind of not just talk about it, but actually get involved. And that was my reason then, increasingly through the 2010s, to actually think about what I could do. And my drive was to see if I could find a way that would make it easy for people to get involved and do something about a problem that, as the stats show, a lot of us are aware of and very concerned about. So that led to, and here now we can cue a little bit of a not sunny slide. We'll move out of the dark, burning pictures of smokestacks and so on to a little bit of sunny uplands. That led to Abundance with my two co-founders, all of us actually with very different backgrounds, but having this common motivation that actually, how can we capture people's desire to do something about a problem without, with making it as easy as possible, and to take away some of the confusion by, in effect, creating a brand and a place to go where they recognized the same kind of concerns and shared values around what we were trying to do. So what is Abundance about? Hope gave you a very kind of quick summary in the beginning. It's about letting people use their money to fund cool businesses that are doing something, in our instance, focusing on sustainable infrastructure. This is an example of actually a sector that we've helped. So 9,000 people have collectively, not all of them, but between them, there've been a fraction of that. That's our customer base who've put 25 million into tidal energy and battery storage and made decent returns on the back of that. Another example here is a pump storage hydro project in Scotland. This was funding the development of it. It's now been bought by a much bigger utility company that's going to build it out, and that's going to help a lot of the wind farms in Scotland that quite often get curtailed. The headlines always present it one way, but actually it's because they just can't get the power down to the places it's needed. This will allow those wind farms to keep producing by storing the energy in a pump storage hydro facility and then releasing it again when it's needed. And then most recently, we have been funding 3 different EV charger installation companies, a total across those 3 companies of 11.5 million, several hundred chargers that's funded, and 2 of those companies have gone on to raise £220 million, which is going to install thousands more. And more recently, although actually we first started writing about this, in our own kind of strategy papers back in probably within the 3 or 5 years of us getting going, creating a municipal bond market for the UK. And that's a very technical term, but I use that because the municipal bond market in the US is incredibly established. And over there, 2 out of 3 infrastructure projects are funded using municipal bonds. That is bonds issued by municipalities and sold to both individuals and institutions. But 40% of that market is taken up by individuals. And overall, the size of it is $450 trillion. Now, we're not talking about reaching a market that size here, but it's really significant. And it actually used to exist in the UK. Councils in the UK did regularly borrow money from their residents, but it was an expensive way to do it because it was paper-based. So what we've done is kind of repurposed it for the digital age and focused very much on the net zero transition, looking at ways for councils to borrow from residents to fund their own climate emergency plans as a way to make those residents feel like they are part of the plan and part of the solution. So they are, and then for the council's perspective, the council is raising money. It's slightly lower cost than raising it from central government. From investors' perspective, it's low risk because these investments are secured against a council's revenues. So they are getting, as an investor, you're getting a low risk but high impact investment that really makes a difference. And if it's happening in your borough, rather that you can invest either in your own place or in other places that are meaning to you, but you can go around and see what it is and how your money is making a difference. I was going to put in the split of what they funded, but it's been a lot of renewable energy, a lot of solar panels, converting rubbish trucks to electric, EV charging installations, clean streets, a wide range of initiatives, all funded by residents and citizens, and where the interest attached to that is then paid back to those residents and citizens, hopefully to be spent if it is their own borough, within their own borough as well. So ultimately, we're talking about the potential to galvanize millions of people through their money, make them feel like they're part of their plan by using their money in a way that is supporting that net zero transition. And then this was a little quote then, since I was on the Natural History Museum at the end of these tips on how to deal with eco anxiety. I liked this quote, so I thought I'd put it in here because ultimately it is about this. These are our systems. We are part of the system. We demand better. But I thought I'd better add my own little addition because it didn't quite complete it, because really it's about what we're going to do. So Louise Wilson, March 2024, let's hop on our bikes and do what we can. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Louise. I'm now going to pass on to Lily Robertson.
Hello. Okay, step 1 is come off mute. Step 2 is share slides. Can you give me a thumbs up, Hope, if you can see that? Yes, perfect. Yeah. Okay, amazing. So hi, everyone. Delighted to be here, delighted to be following Louise. And she set me up perfectly because we talk a little bit about hopping on your bike and doing something. So I, just to intro to me really quickly, I'm a career marketer, and I'm a life coach. I also teach yoga, but I'm also someone who's passionate about the climate, and I've been lucky enough to work in a number of companies that have been focused on financial services or financial well-being, and it's really sparked my interest and my awareness of how what we do with our money specifically can be a really positive contributing factor to the planet. And so I'm just going to take you on a little whistle-stop tour of some of the things I've learned, come across on that journey, just in case you weren't aware, just how our spending and saving can make a difference. The big caveat with all of this is I am a very enthusiastic amateur. I'm not a financial advisor, so none of this is specific financial advice for you all, just about raising awareness. So first of all, I guess, why does our money matter? So I think in general, there's a pretty big knowledge gap in the UK when it comes to money at all, let alone what your money can do and how you can have a positive impact with it. We're not taught about money in school. We kind of pick up our habits of what we know from our parents, and God bless them, that doesn't always mean that it's correct or the full spectrum. It can be quite taboo talking about money. I've heard a quote that British people are more comfortable talking about their sexual partners than they are talking about money. So it remains something a bit hidden. And I think there's a gender gap here as well. Women are often spoken to very differently about money and less often than men are. If you grew up with brothers in your family, you might have seen that in action, just different knowledge being given to you as you were growing up. And then there is this sustainability gap as well, that a very low number of people realize that their money can be a tool to be more sustainable. So it's a bit of a blind spot often for all of us. So what can you do? So first thing is your pension. So I'd kind of say this is the biggest opportunity most of us have to do something positive with our money, simply because most of us, if you are working, have a pension. Since 2012, it's been mandatory in the UK. And it's probably going to be one of the biggest pots of money that you accumulate over your life. So therefore, the biggest opportunity to do something positive with it. And it's important because we don't really pay attention to our pensions because they're something in the future, therefore when we retire. But they are actively investing throughout our lifetime. And if they're not actively investing in the right way, they could be slowing down the green transition, or certainly investing in companies that are almost making it worse. There's a few organizations that have tried to quantify the impact of changing where your pension is invested, and they've come up with between 20 and 27 times more impactful than the combined impact of a number of other behaviors that we're more familiar with, about going vegan, not flying, driving electric, lowering your energy consumption, taking shorter showers. So it really does make a huge difference. And I think for a lot of us, it's as simple as just logging in and engaging with your pension. It can feel a bit of a tiresome admin task, but actually it's a really simple step that has a really huge impact. And even more important, again, there's a gender angle here. If you're a woman, to engage with your pension, numbers of studies have been done with results ranging from, well, all of them agree that women tend to retire with less in their pension than men. I read one study that said it was 90% less, but another that was a bit more conservative at 13% less. But they all agree that typically women have less in their pension, so even more reason to engage. Second is your savings. So building up savings is great from a financial resilience standpoint, helps us stay out of an unwanted debt, builds future wealth. Again, there's a gender lens here. Scottish Widows did a study in 2020 that said that women typically have 55% less in savings than men. So again, for your financial resilience as a woman, it's important to keep focused on growing your savings. But it's not only good for us, but it's good for the planet, because every pound spent has a higher carbon impact than a pound saved, because a pound saved isn't driving sort of change in the system. Something isn't being created, moved, pulled apart, put back together. So saving for a rainy day is a very green act. And so, but over and above that, you have the opportunity to think about where you put your savings. So the institution that you allow to hold your savings is using that money while you aren't to make loans or investments and paying you an interest rate in return. And so what those projects and loans are is important to the carbon footprint of your savings account. So there's two ways I think you can look at this. You can either look at what are the institutions that I'm holding my savings with? Are they institutions that are a little more sort of eco or community minded to the core? So you've got your building societies, your cooperatives. There's a couple of dedicated kind of eco banks like Triodos and Ecology Bank. Or you could be looking within your current provider at whether they've got greener products, savings products available to you. A little harder to find because sometimes they're only available to existing customers, but it's worth having a look at what's out there. I think a good example is NS&I, National Savings and Investments, who released a green bond a couple of years ago. So if you've got savings with them already, you could perhaps look at transferring that over. Again, this is for you to do your own homework, not a financial advice, but just things to be aware of. And the final area is spending. So can't really avoid it. We need to live and function in society. So stopping spending isn't really an option. But we do vote with our pounds and our pence. And where we spend our money is a vote for or against a company's values and principles. There is a gender angle here, surprise, surprise, slightly more positive than the others, but women tend to have more influence over day-to-day spending than men. So Nielsen and the Food Marketing Institute have both done studies that say 80% of the time women are primary grocery shoppers, and Capital One did research that 89% of women compared to 41% of men take responsibility for household shopping. So this is a place where, as a woman, you do actually have a greater degree of influence than perhaps elsewhere. And I don't want to sit and sort of tell you how to spend your money, but there's two things that I would, or two ideas that I would highlight within how you think about day-to-day spending. One is to do with the sort of misleading idea of this green premium, and also the kind of watching out for greenwashing and untrustworthy marketing as you're thinking about how you spend your money. So the green premium is this idea that things, more eco-friendly items have a higher price tag because they pay their staff properly, or they have better supply chains for using higher quality raw materials, whatever it may be. And that has sort of can sometimes come across, or the rhetoric can sometimes come across that means being green is a slightly unattainable or unrealistic way to shop and live for a lot of people, particularly in the context of the cost of living. This idea that to have a positive impact is more expensive. And I think it can be true in some cases. There are some things that do cost more because a Primark t-shirt costs £5, a Stella McCartney t-shirt costs £50. So there is a price differential there. But actually, that's not the case universally. And I think a lot of the things that are energy efficient or reduce waste also are very cost efficient. Examples just that off the top of my head would be, if you buy things in bulk, you're reducing cost and plastic on packaging. How you use energy in your home, the more energy efficient you are, usually the more cost effective it is. Repairing things instead of buying new saves you money. When you borrow instead of rent, you are probably saving yourself money. If you cycle, you're saving money on the transport, and you're doing positive things for your health, which might have a knock-on impact for less healthcare costs down the road. If you buy and sell on apps like Vinted or Depop, you're saving money or maybe even earning money. So I think there's a bit of a narrative there that could afford to be flipped. And then the second one is sort of looking out for untrustworthy marketing and being a critical consumer. It's very trendy, I think, now, particularly in the last year. I think seeing more and more companies leaning into being plant-based, being green, being sustainable. And I think I'm a marketer, so I'm very acutely aware that marketing is sort of built around trying to create new desires and new reasons to buy things. But I think it's worth being a bit cynical, or at least trying to be as objective as possible about what you're seeing, because a lot of companies can make big claims about their sort of eco-credentials that aren't substantiated. A great example from, I think, the last year was a low-cost airline based out of Ireland, claiming to be Europe's favorite low-emission airline and running a whole load of ads that were, I think, in airports and magazines and things, which was completely unsubstantiated and pulled by the Advertising Standards Agency, but only after it had been published. So there's nothing stopping companies, even in very obviously non-eco-friendly industries, from claiming things with tricksy advertising. So something to be conscious of, long story, but the sort of action there, I think, is to be really conscious of the labels on your products when you're spending money and when you're buying. Those are the sort of arbiters of truth in terms of third-party verification. So things like organic, B Corp, fair trade, these sorts of things really do matter more and more, I think. And then just moving on to kind of the sort of intent to action gap. Louise alluded to it, and this sort of sense of eco-anxiety that can creep up on us, and this sort of decision paralysis sometimes when there's so much potential, but we're not quite sure where to start. And I think this is especially true for climate-related action. So The Guardian did some research and said that only 10% of people who report being concerned about climate change actually act on those beliefs. So in my sort of life as a coach, what I do is help people, set goals and build habits to reach them. So I wanted to share just a few thoughts, food for thought. If you are in that position, if you feel like you want to do something but you don't quite know where to start, things that might help with kind of closing that intention action gap. So one is thinking about your values, your specific values and your sphere of influence. So there's a lot of ways to change. There's a lot of things you could do. How do you find the one thing that you are going to do that really matters? And I would say take some time to reflect on what is really important to you. What is it from within the kind of world of sustainability that really sort of sings to you? Is it gender equality? Is it biodiversity? Is it animal welfare? Find the thing that really motivates you. And then think about your personal sphere of influence. If you are the person in your household who does 80% of the daily shopping, then maybe that's your sphere of influence that you want to control. And maybe your decision then is, right, or your value is ocean health, and you're the person who does the shopping. So maybe your decision is, I'm going to change the way we shop to prioritize things that have lower plastic or are more positive from an ocean perspective. And that will just resonate with you more and be something you can kind of get to grips with and really stick with. To make anything stick, you need to change your habits. And it's about embedding those habits and having them feel really, really natural. A few things to bear in mind with that. Recognize it takes time. Neuroscientists say that it takes 63 days to build a new habit. So don't beat yourself up if you don't change everything about the way you shop overnight. Stick with it. Allow yourself the time to kind of build a good habit that sticks around. Clear goals. Try not to do everything at once. Rather than maybe leaving this call and going, oh my God, I'm going to green everything about my personal finance in the next year. Pick something specific. Maybe give yourself the goal of, I'm going to log in and look at the possible green funds I could put my pension into by the end of July 2024. Thinking about your goal is good. Writing it down is better. Telling someone is the best way to hold yourself to account. And also maybe you want to bring someone in on your goal, make them your buddy, your accountability buddy, ask them to check in on you, share what you're doing. There's also one of the companies I worked for was called PA Consulting, and we did a big study on consumer sort of sentiment around green finance. And one of the, I can't remember the exact stat right now off the top of my head, but one of the highest sort of rated influences on people and their decision making was friends, family, and community. So again, when you think about your sphere of influence, we are much more influenced by people around us than we are by corporations or by institutions. So I think bear that in mind and maybe bring people into your journey with you could be a great way of sticking with it. Remove the obstacles. Again, if you procrastinate, if you've wanted to do this for a long time and you haven't, be realistic with yourself, sit down and reflect on what stops you. Is it that you just can't stand the admin of having to dig out your pension password, or you just really don't, the sort of overwhelming sense of boredom when you think about money, you just can't get past it? Notice what it is that stops you and try to think about ways that you can overcome that or remove the friction. Again, maybe it's doing it with someone. Is it rewarding yourself for doing it? But really drill down into what stops you and then try and find a way to remove that blocker. And the final one is habit stacking. Some of you might have heard of this, but I think this is the idea that rather than trying to create a whole new habit, could you just add on to something you do already? So in the context of how we think about money and sustainability, if you already compare the cost of items before you buy them, could you just habit stack and add comparing the eco credentials of 2 products before you buy them, just so that you're not trying to create a whole new behavior, but you're just building on and adapting one you've already got. And the final one I would say is realism. I think it's hard to change the way we think about money. The climate is really hard. The climate options are really hard to navigate. There is this kind of sometimes underlying sense of eco-anxiety that Louise alluded to. So it can take time to kind of get your head around that. So I think be realistic with yourself. Also, we live in a world where, like I said, marketing is built to try and sell us something new and always tell us the opposite of what we might believe to be true. So you're also navigating that whole world. So I would say focus on the sort of daily small wins and celebrate those. Just because you haven't solved climate change by the end of month 2 doesn't mean you're not having a fantastic impact and doing something really powerful. Those little actions we each individually take really do build up to an impressive whole and have the power to sort of move mountains, I think. So 2 examples I would share there's an organization called Meat Free Monday, which tries to promote eating less meat. And they equate that if you had 1 vegetarian meal every week for a year, you would be saving the equivalent of 1.5 tennis courts worth of rainforest. And then if you ladder that up to a family of 4, that's 6 tennis courts worth of rainforest that is saved. And if there's how many houses are there on your street, the multiplier effect of that can be really impressive. And the other is, some of you again might have heard of this, but the Blue Planet effect, which is the public response to the David Attenborough documentaries a few years ago, was enough to change policy around single-use plastic. So there is real power in this kind of consumer movement and changing consumer behavior. I'm a massive believer in it. So I think it can be really, really important. And then finally, just sharing some tools, some sites that I have used or come across or found really valuable as I've thought about this more myself over the last few years. Make My Money Matter, a fantastic organization, really focused on raising awareness about what your pension can do. Good With Money is a great site. It's a bit like Money Saving Expert, but for green finance. They've got some great top 5 savings accounts, top 10 green ISAs, that sort of thing. Your Juno is a great financial well-being app specifically focused at women. Their founder has a fantastic quote that I read recently, which is that money isn't just a tool, it's an agent of change, which feels very, very on brand for our conversation today. Octopus Money is a great money coaching organization. Full disclosure, I used to work for them, but I do think they're a fantastic organization anyway. VestPod, Smart Purse, Female Invest, also great female focused organizations and podcasts trying to close the gender gap in financial education. So would really recommend all of those. And that's it from me.
Thanks so much, Louise and Lily. Do we have any questions? I think we do have one hand raised. Joel, do you want to go ahead and ask your question?
Yeah, that was so brilliant and informative. Thank you. And I thought it was so salient that you mentioned that kind of one of the biggest impacts on people is friends and family, right? Because I'm in mid-20s, that sort of time when you're thinking about saving. So I've tried to be doing it in a green way. But one of the things I've had from friends and family is, oh, well, ignore all that green stuff, just give your money to whoever's going to offer you the best interest rate. And I was just wondering if you have any advice on how to provide pushback to those sorts of comments from friends and family and how to convert them into green finance.
Good question.
Yeah.
That's oh, sorry, go ahead, Louise.
No, I was going to say, Joel, I think, if you just have a look around the market and understand what the offers are that are out there, and then put them in front. I think it's always difficult to try and tell friends and family what they should be doing when it comes to money. But actually, if you can prove through evidence that there are compelling options that also allow you to invest, or them to invest or save in a way that's aligned with those values. Because one of the things, so I spent 16 years in the city, and the biggest problem then, and it is changing now, is that when you went to go and see a financial advisor or approached anybody about it, then the conversation was always around how much do you want to make, and how much risk are you prepared to take, and it never focused on, and does it matter to you what your money does? But actually, when you ask people that question first, does it matter to you what your money is invested in? And you don't have to compromise on return for the amount of risk you're prepared to take, then more often than not, people, if they think about it, go, well, yes. But it's quite difficult, though, to say to them, well, take a lower return. But there are lots of options that are out there that don't require you to take a lower return. I'm just going to use this moment as well. So I got overexcited in my statement of the size of the US municipal bond market. It's not 450 trillion. I realized after I said it, I meant 4.5 trillion, still pretty big. Anyway, I'm just using that, just inserting a quick correction to my previous statements.
I
Hope
would
that helped,
answer
Joel.
Yeah, and I would say very similarly, my parents have a similar perspective, I think, perhaps to yours, Joel. And I think what I did was to find the sort of what are they called, like the KPI docs that show you the performance of various ESG funds that I've available to me in my pension, and just assuage that assumption people make, I think, that green or ethical funds underperform the wider market, which they don't always. So that was what I used.
I think there's a fabulous adage though in investment, which is be diversified. And just that's a really key thing. Actually, a lot of ESG funds did go up, because there was, before the cost of living crisis, actually there was a lot of focus on that, and there was a lot of money that went into those funds, and the prices of them went up probably higher than was then justified. Maybe that's the wrong way around. If the world was kind of all, global economies were all pulling towards a greener future, then it would all have been good. But unfortunately, COVID and the kind of the ramifications of that has unfortunately done quite a disservice to. So we need to get it back on track, because it's a much bigger problem than COVID ever was. And COVID is the fantastic way of actually reminding all of us how much we are prepared to make really fundamental changes to the way that we live on a pinhead. So, yeah.
Thanks so much for that question, and thanks to us for responses, guys. I've got another hand from Yvonne. Do you want to come off mute and ask your question?
Sure, thank you. And thank you so much for organising this. And I know it's a partnership with the EDI and the climate change team. My question is education, because this has been so informative for me personally. And I'm just thinking, how can we reach those who need to hear it? Schools in particular. In schools, and unfortunately, we're not taught any financial education, which I think is such a shame, because it's really important for children to start learning this from such a young age. I know now we have apps that Go Henry, etc., that do that, but I think the best way to do that is in schools, to make us more financially resilient, was the first thing. And then secondly, when you mentioned diversify, I was thinking about like marginalized and underrepresented groups, but also with the cost of living, like low income families, etc. So how can we get the word to those who need it the most, so to speak, and reaching those, especially with the cost of living, who unfortunately are more challenged financially than others? We know with socioeconomic factors affect in terms of geography where people live, but also if you belong to a marginalised group, you're more likely to be impacted. So I think the question is twofold. How can we educate those communities and support them to become more financially resilient and empower them, but also how are we getting the word out to them more so they're aware of these? I think the question is access, ensure equity of access to these, what's the word? To what's out there, basically.
Yeah. Oh, Yvonne, I think you've asked two really great questions and two really, really knotty questions. The kind of education on personal finance, I mean, you're absolutely right. There just isn't enough of that from an early age. And there are a couple of charities I know that do quite a lot of work. One is called Pay It Forward, another's called My Bank, which does they do quite a lot of programs. But ultimately, I think there is a passing nod to kind of managing your money within the curriculum now, but I think it's still just a very small part of it. So I think it would be brilliant if we could have more of that built into the curriculums. Unfortunately, I definitely can't wave that one, but I would support you all the way. And on marginalised communities, there's no getting away from the fact that saving and investing is a preserve for people who can afford to do it. And you know, I could curse COVID quite regularly because actually it is the ramifications of that has left us in a place where that luxury, if you like, is now afforded to fewer people than it was before. I spent time, you know, a while ago going, well, you know, if you think about how much money, I totted it up, and it was something like, and I stopped counting after I got to $16 trillion globally that governments spent on COVID, which is an issue that could have affected hundreds of millions of people. In fact, we don't know what the overall number of deaths were, and it was awful for people who were affected by it. But climate is going to affect billions of people. So I don't know. To me, it's a kind of failure of global leadership that we are unable to bring those global leaders together to say, surely, if anything demanded really coordinated action, this is it. I wish, oh my God, I spend so much time thinking about this, wondering how on earth, if you think back to the financial crisis as well, and how much you know, global economies got together to act in a concerted way to stop a really significant problem. How we fail on this one, I don't know. And it's not, you know, we used to talk about the fact that the problem was a bit remote, that it was too far out. Actually, it's not. We're worried about it now. It's affecting us now. And still we kind of fail. And we talk about the cost of it and the impact. We can rewrite all of that and make it an opportunity. Ultimately, it's a huge opportunity for us to bring a lot of people up out of this. But for all the time I've spent agonizing over how to come up with a way to solve it, I'm afraid it's stumped me.
Thanks, Louise.
Lily.
And
Lily, what
Louise,
about
if you have
you?
anything to add
I'm not going to be able to
on
help.
that, if you do have anything to add on that, Lily, just please do add that to the chat. And I did just want to let another person ask their question. I know we have run over time, and we'll just probably end on this last quick question. Saskia, I'll let you ask your.
Hello. Firstly, thank you. I just had a general conversation with a friend who used to work in the city at the weekend about I've got 12 more years before my pension's over and how do I invest? So coming here today has given me real food for thought, and I can really look at what you've said. Just going back on what Yvonne said about the education, I don't know if Louise or Lily, if you're involved in anything around that. I work with young people. 10 years ago, I was doing life skill lessons with teenagers, and I would work from birth to the end of your life, and I would include pension, and they'd say, what's that? They had no idea what that is. And I'm very passionate about that, and I'll do a life cycle with a young person, and I think it would be good to do something. Thank you for highlighting the Pay It Forward and My Bank, because I'll look into that. But I just wondered if both of you were involved, or if you were interested in having a look at something around that.
Always happy to help where I can, Saskia. I don't want to overpromise. You know, but very happy to actually maybe join dots with people. Maybe that's the most practical, valuable thing that I could do. I know both of the organisations, My Bank and Pay It Forward, and I'd be happy to join you up with them. And I think maybe, Yvonne, just one last comment, and it goes back to my hop on your bike comment. Let's hop on our bikes and just do what we can. And Lily made the point as well, actually, it's like small amounts of effort might not feel like they do very much, but when you put them all together, actually they really can make a big difference. But they also, more than anything else, they really help to nudge the system in the right direction.
Thanks, Louise. And we'll just pass over to Lily for the kind of last, but if you do have any more reflections on either Saskia or Yvonne.
Sadly not. Again, it's
questions.
sort of
No.
there's the sort of ultimate questions, aren't they? Which I haven't. My experience has been more with educating adults, and I would I bet on the fact that actually you could probably ask quite a few adults about their pension and they'd have the same response as a 12-year-old, because I think there is just this really gap. So I think it's probably a pincer movement, isn't it? It's upskilling the parents as well as the children, because then it's kind of got to trickle down as well as a top up or bottom up rather.
Thanks so much. And I know we've gone over time. I do just have a few final things to share with you all. Just to wrap up, here's a few kind of more climate action opportunities on offer from H&F, including the H&F Green Investment. So you should be able to click on that slide. I know Louise mentioned the Green Investment product, and our current offer is at a fixed rate of 4.6% over the next 5 years. We've also got a climate microgrants program project that you can apply for. That's up to £500 to fund your own micro initiatives. And here's a kind of map of some of those more existing projects, as well as a few of the other opportunities happening across the borough. As Louise mentioned quite adequately at the beginning, lots of people, most people do care about climate change, but it's hard to know perhaps where to start. And our Climate Cafe series is kind of aimed at making things easier for people. And we do save the recordings on our YouTube channel, so you can go back and listen to previous ones as well as this one, and subscribe to our Climate Connects newsletter for more opportunities as they arise. So thank you so much to our speakers, and thank you everyone for attending.